and always to you are King. Bless and let there be love in our home, the marriage experience ordained by you alone. The marriage experience ordained by you alone.
Welcome to the Marriage Experience program with Ayakunle and Bosade Santos, where they explore what it means to cultivate a God-centric marriage by delivering realistic and biblical wisdom, pointers, and insights from couples and individuals on the marriage journey. Join them today as they share some insights. Enjoy.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Marriage Experience program, where real couples have real conversations about real life.
Absolutely. We're so glad you're with us, whether you tuned in on purpose or we just met while you were scanning the dial. Do they still use dial these days? Anyway, stay with us. Don't go anywhere. This might just be exactly what you need to hear for today.
And now, if this is your first time listening to us, you picked a beautiful moment to join the conversation.
Around here, we believe marriage is one of God's most beautiful gifts. And when you nurture it with intention, commitment, and the right heart, it becomes something that's truly, truly wonderful.
Absolutely. You know, we build on God's word. You know, we share practical tools you can then actually use on Tuesday afternoon.
Why Tuesday afternoon? What's that about?
Friday afternoon, every single day of the week. And we leave plenty of room for grace, because growth is a journey.
So take a breath, lean in, and open your heart. We've always invited you to grab your favorite drink and join us at the Marriage Experience virtual table, because today's conversation just might change the way you show up in your marriage this week.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience program with Ayakunle and Bosade Santos.
Now, in the past couple of weeks, we started exploring the idea that instead of trying to improve everything in our marriages all at once this year, we can intentionally focus on practicing one attribute of love each season. So tonight we're going to continue to discuss, looking at practical tools at handling problems.
As the saying goes, prevention is better than cure. So what if, rather than simply reacting to challenges as they arise, we prepared our marriages season by season for the potholes we're all bound to encounter along the journey this year? So one good question to ask at this time is that, in terms of, is it better for us to be reactive or to be responsive?
Yes. Yes. So let's start with this. How does remembering God's presence, God's patience, with us, with his presence, soften our response when we realize how patient God has been with us? When we're talking about how patient God has been with our growth, or with our repeated mistakes, or our slow transformation, how do we, how does that affect us?
One of the things that I'm learning more and more about God, and I think it all started last year when I got this eye-opening aha moment when reading through the Bible in 1 year, and it just dawned on me the fervency of his love for the Israelites in spite of all their mistakes. I could see myself in the picture of the Israelites, that if he could go after people of the old covenant like that, as ferociously as he did in the Bible, how much more me? And how he was gentle. There was a point in time when he told Moses that, you know what, I'm done with these people. I'm just going to destroy all of them, and then I'll start a nation with you, because you have been good. So I know I can deal with you, but let's just let's just destroy these ones who are how does the Bible put them, hard neck or something like that? Yeah,
hardened hearts. Yes.
yeah, stiff neck. Yeah, not yeah, stiff neck. And Moses pleaded, interceded on behalf of the people that, no, Lord, if you do that, all the nations around will say you were not capable of taking them to the promised land in the first place. And the Bible said God relented or repented, So it's the same thing right through. That was how they would do one thing, like the Bible would say that they would do what seemed right in their own eyes, and they would walk away from God. God would maybe pull back a little for some period, but then he chases right back after them to bring them back out of whatever they got themselves into, and he would bring them back to safety. He would, help them to overcome those adversaries that had confronted them. So it's the same thing with us. If we think about that, then it's easier for us to look at each other from the same perspective and just think that, listen, we're all work in progress. Nobody is perfect. And like I often like to say, switch roles. If I was on the giving end, would I want the person who's receiving it how would I want them to treat me? So
yeah,
that
what you're referring mostly to is that the fact that about human beings making repeated mistakes, repeating the same mistakes all the time. But even when you have situations where humans take 5 steps forward and 4 steps backwards or something, then there's that perception or understanding or evidence even of a slow transformation. So when you look at, especially
when you look at somebody like Gideon or even Samson, when you look at them, Gideon took so long before he eventually believed God to move forward. The angel came, addressed him as mighty man of valor, was like, who, me? I'm the least of the least of the least of the least, and but eventually God got him there. Same thing with Samson. His was pride, he just like the business is got it all, but eventually he realized what it was, and then he entered at his death. He entered into the fullness of his purpose.
And now, what you described, the examples you have given are people who are probably more hesitant in that transformation. You could also have people who just blatantly just refuse. I mean, someone like Jonah, he knew what he had to do. He wasn't scared per se, but he had his judgment. That judgment that, what, look, I know you, God, they don't deserve it. All they have to say is they're sorry, and then you forgive them. So, yes, so there are times we not just repeat mistakes. I mean, when you read through Exodus and you just read about the Israelites, you just go, wow, these guys, today they repent, they get forgiven, everything gets fixed, and they go right back into their problems and everything, their sins and everything. So it's also something we must look out for, not just making mistakes, but the fact that we may end up being slow in our transformation and the way we run our marriages and the way we run our lives.
Absolutely. God in the Bible speaks of himself as being slow to anger, and we find, I don't know if that was the first instance, that in Exodus 34, where he described himself as slow to anger, but when we remember that, or we remember that attribute of him as being slow to anger, then we ourselves, we begin to appreciate that we're being formed slowly. God is patient with us. He's not, he knows the different twists and turns that we're going to take to get to where we want to get to. And we realize that we're still becoming the perfect image of Christ. We're still in that process, and that we're not finished projects at all, or products.
That reminds me of one of my aunts that she always says, that we all work in progress, and that's it. We're constantly getting towards. Actually, I just remembered I can't remember what the equation now is, but an equation we had to work with in school when I was in university about getting to infinity, that the more you move, the slower you get, but you actually never get there. You're getting closer, but you never get there. So we're finished. We are not finished products, but we're getting closer and closer to perfection, and therefore it becomes
that makes it
harder to then demand maturity, instant maturity from our spouse.
From our spouses,
So let's look at ourselves. Let's ask these questions like, do I actually extend that grace we've been talking about? Do I extend that grace that I want? Do I extend it to my spouse?
I mean, I think in the heat of the moment, we, especially depending on how severe the offense is, right? We often forget that there's grace to be extended.
And there's also grace to be received.
Because we constantly receive grace from God, but in the heat of that anger, we forget that we should extend grace, and we tend to roll with our emotions, with the pain of that letdown, that rather than just pulling back and allowing the emotions to dampen. One of the things that I have trained myself to do is more to, you may say it's sulking, but it's me just pulling back so that I don't say what I will regret or do what I will regret. So I tend to just withdraw whenever there is that pain in my heart. I withdraw from the person until I'm able to figure it out, figure my mind out, or offload my mind onto the Holy Spirit. And then I can now determine, with the help of the Holy Spirit, whether that relationship was going to go back in full swing. Of course, with you, it will always go back in full swing, regardless of what you do. But for some other people, it may not go back in full swing, not because I'm trying to protect myself, but because I do not want to put before them something they cannot handle.
And that leads me to this next point, where we've got to remind ourselves that we shouldn't expect an overnight change from someone that God himself is shaping over time. God knows all the answers. God knows the best way for things to be done. And if God is shaping our spouses over a period of time, we mustn't expect an immediate change. One of the scriptures that's is having more and more of an impact on our lives, is the fact that, look, that talks about, the woman whose husband is not, doesn't know the Lord, that she would win him over by her character. It's not about trying to force something through or rush something through. Look, you just do your part and allow God to do the other part. And so we must always have this gratitude, for divine patience, because that gratitude then softens a lot of marital situations. That we must have the gratitude to understand that God is doing something about it. God has this thing under control. Step back and allow God to do his work.
Absolutely.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience program with Ayakunle and Bosade Santos.
So let's ask this question. If a couple decided on, let's say, a plan that for the next 90 days, they would practice patience intentionally, what would that actually look like?
First of all, just like we've been talking about patience and how we want to be intentional and how we don't want to rush things. I would say, first of all, maybe slower reactions. We want to pause before we respond. Note here, it's a response, not a reaction. We want to pause because the moment you jump into responding or reacting or then there's the likelihood that you haven't thought things through properly. A practical way of doing that is to count to 5 before replying someone in a tense moment. That doesn't mean you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and you straight away no. You count to 5 that allows you to.
But does that really work? When they tell people to count, do you, in the heat of the moment, do you remember to count?
See, that's the point.
Would you remember to count?
That's the point. When, for instance, when you train for emergencies, one of the things I learned, in my career is that you ask yourself that question of what if something really does happen? I practice this in the simulator every 6 months and go through all these emergencies and all that. What if it does really happen? And I never had a major one, thank God for that through my career. But the different emergencies I had, I remember one of the most challenging, I would say, was an engine that just ran down to idle at takeoff. So it's like losing an engine at takeoff, the time you really need a lot of power. When it happened, it wasn't scary. It honestly wasn't scary because I had been through that several times.
So what you're saying now
the
is
more you count to 5 in a non-threatening situation, the more you think about it in an ordinary situation. You're watching TV, just remember that, look, if this ever happens, this is what I'm going to do. If that ever happens, that's what training is all about.
And I think it also buttresses some things that I tend to do. So I create a scenario in my mind. I mean, nothing has happened, but I just create a scenario in my mind. It could even be, oftentimes I do this when I'm walking and I'm going, oh, what if, maybe this is morbid, I don't know. But then I'm thinking, if somebody just even comes out of nowhere now and tries to attack me, what would I do? Maybe I really shouldn't be thinking like that, but then I figure it out. I figure what my responses would be and how I would try to defend myself, and I look around and I don't know, maybe that's even, those kind of things. I create those kind of scenarios and I work it out what I would do.
It's one of the things that I personally would always suggest that we do a lot. Just keep thinking. I mean, it doesn't mean you. I think one of the major oil companies that we worked with, they have this thing called critical. I think it's called critical unease or something like that. I can't remember. In other words, you're always looking out for ways in which things can go wrong. Now, that's not living a life of being paranoid. It's not living a life of fear at all. But the more you have prepared for a problem, the more it is easier, the more you can respond to it rather than reacting to it.
I even read it somewhere to do that, but it's just something I tend to
critical
do.
unease, I think that's what it's called, So when you are faced with, say, someone sends you a text and it's it immediately gets you to gets you upset or something, you want to delay things. Always want to create that space. So again, the more you think about the scenario before it happens, the more likely you're able to control the scenario properly when it does happen. Another tool is never to respond when you are very emotional, because then like the saying goes, when people are drunk or upset, or once they have those extremes of emotion, either very highly emotionally charged or very very low charge, like when people are tipsy or drunk, then they tend to speak the truth. You really know what's in. So you want to respond and not to react. You know, and you want to say that internally before speaking as often as you can, especially when you're not in that situation. You know, and another tool is, you know, clarifying before correcting. So what are the practical ways would you say in clarifying before correcting?
Things like, oh, you should have, you should have done that. You know, so you can say something like, can you help me understand what you were thinking? At least let them say something before you assume that what they said was, or what they were thinking when they said whatever they said is exactly what. Make sure that you know exactly what was going on in their own minds. Clarifying that would, like I just said, would reduce the risk of assumptions that may bring friction eventually. Because assumptions would always fuel impatience. And also just ask that one clarifying question before you try to correct somebody.
So how else can we practice patience internally? We've talked about thinking ahead of time and preparing, you know, going through the scenarios, and that is practicing patience intentionally. So how else can we? Any other examples?
I guess we can create space, like we've been saying. Just maybe walk away. Walk away, not in a fit, not in a fit of anger, you know, but excuse yourself. Let the other person know that do you know what? I need a moment. Let me take a moment and just go. Go for a walk. Go for a walk.
Yeah, because space protects the tone. You know, you tone is not just. Remember, it's not just what you say; it's also how you say it. So you want to agree as a couple that either person can just make that request, you know, and to pause without penalty because you've prepared for it rather ahead of time. So you want to allow time to process things. You don't want to rush an agreement. You don't want to force immediate decisions because you've created time. And so for big conversations, for example, you could even have up to 24 hours, you know, before you come to your final decision.
As long as you
come back to that conversation and not allow it just to.
I think we were talking about that last week. That it's not like you're running away from it or you want to try and sweep it under the carpet, but you truly want to diffuse the tension at that moment, and then you honor your words and come back to that conversation in a less tense attitude.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience Program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
So let's go on in this conversation now. How else can we practice this intentionality that we're talking about regarding patience? I'm thinking we could have a morning reset prayer, like just sort of ironing maybe after you've had the conversation, the following morning, just put everything back to God and just allow God to truly bring the healing. Because if this is one thing we do a lot, that we bring our faults before God, especially after we've had that conversation. We own our part of the I don't want to use failure because that's the only word that's coming to my mind. You know, we own our part of that situation, and then we just ask God to truly heal our hearts, because especially if it was difficult for each side to own their parts. If we went back and forth a lot before we eventually agree that, do you know what, you did this, I did this, then that way we actually truly need healing for that process. So we would intentionally ask God for healing, and we, just ask for the grace to be slow to anger, that day, so that we are not still sitting within whilst we're supposed to have finished it. And then at the end of the day also, we again reflect on where did impatience try to surface today. Because when one thing I've noticed is that when things are not very smooth between us, it tends to make me pull away from people in general. I don't want to talk. I don't want to socialize until the rapport between us gets recovered. And of course, that when people are trying to, make me be part of a conversation, it can make me become short. And so I may tend to see impatience during the day in that instance. So, but when we know that, look, at the end of today, I'm going to have to think about how was I impatient, it helps me to get out of that rut faster.
And of course, something else along the lines of what you're talking about is the tone. We've mentioned that already. You could ask the question at the end of the day, was my tone aligned with love? Because the times, actually most times, especially when you've got those extremes of emotions, you don't quite realize when your tone changes. And you want to create a situation where you're replacing a critical sentence with a curious one. You don't want to come across as being interrogating the person or something along the sort. You don't want to spring on demands. That force or create an expectation of perfection from your spouse, because what you want to do is to cultivate, invite, we want to invite feedback, we want to invite different behaviors, etc., to cultivate that relationship, to create an environment of love. Remember, if love is patient, then patience is the soil where everything else grows.
And it's interesting. We ask God to give us patience, but then we don't expect the tension, because patience can only come in tense moments where we now have to make that choice to be patient.
I mean, it's just like the word peace, right? You can't have left without a right. You can't have north without a south, because you need something to compare it with. So if you want patience, then if you don't have something that would test or something that would require patience, then it's not patience, is it?
And that's where that scripture comes in, that God causes all things to work together for good. When we look at that, we tend to think it's the circumstance, it's the external that God works on. No, God works on us. That's what that scripture is actually talking about, that God causes whatever that thing is to make us better, to grow us, and like even at creation, God called light out of darkness. Same thing here. God will call good out of that evil situation, or maybe not evil, out of that bad situation that will make us better people.
And just to dig deeper into this thing about tone, you could ask yourself a question of that: how does tone shape emotional climate? Tone is actually an invisible architecture, because you've got the same words, but then with a different tone, it has a different impact. For instance,
it reminds me of that Yoruba adage that to apologize, you can apologize in a literally put. It said you can apologize in a female way or in a male way, meaning you can apologize in a mild mannered way, or you can apologize still in a passive aggressive way,
or just because, of course, when translating languages, it's there's some languages that don't quite do justice when you translate the words, because really what it's saying is just the opposite, because male is opposite of female. Just like, I mean, for instance, if I ask you a question and I say, did you remember to take out the trash tonight? Okay, that's one tone. I could use exactly the same words and go, did you remember to take out the trash tonight?
It's already accusing me that you didn't take out the trash tonight.
So both sentences are identical, but the climate under which I ask the question were very different. So tone communicates either safety or threat, just as we just demonstrated, or respect or dismissal, partnership or superiority. So how does our home feel when this thing called tone is gentle? How does it feel? When tone is managed properly.
One of the things that I have learned that's now helping me to modulate, especially words in general, is the fact that the more I use sarcasm, the more I'm training my brain to not believe the truth, because sarcasm, more often than not, is not truth. So it's the same thing when I use words that are not expressing how I'm feeling in terms of the right way to feel. When I use words that negate all the attributes of love, of patience, of kindness, then I'm training my brain to go that way. But if I don't want to go that way, then I'm under compulsion to calm myself down, bring down that emotion, and respond in a way that I want my brain to fix itself to, this is how we behave. So that has really helped me in terms of watching my tone, in terms of actually diffusing any tension within me before I speak. Someone said something, I think it's you who shared the story with me, or I can't remember who shared the story with us, that a spouse said that whenever her husband starts to pray in tongues, then she knows that she's actually now crossed the limit. So when he's praying in tongues, then she knows it's time to back off, and not tip him over into that place. And that's a good one. That's a good response. That's
a good tool too.
A good tool. Yeah, rather than him blowing up, he takes the opportunity to allow the Holy Spirit to bring him under subjection, bring his temperament at that time under subjection, and that's really good and very effective too.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience program with Ayakunle and Bosade Santos.
So now, kindness isn't always about what is said. Like we said, it's about how it lands. Another question to ask is, why does kindness often drop when life speeds up, when life accelerates? Why do we tend to be short on our fuses?
Yeah, the human mind can only, contrary to what some people believe, but the human mind can only process one piece of information at a time.
So there's nothing like a multitasking,
really. So, and because the brain, I mean, there's a huge capacity, but in terms of managing a task or information, it can only do one at a time. And there's something called, or what everyone refers to as the bandwidth. When the brain is busy trying to solve one issue, then it narrows the bandwidth that's available for something else. So when life speeds up, we are spending a lot of time trying to solve certain things very quickly. We're spending so much time trying to manage it. So cognitive load then increases. Stress rises. And then because of that, margins available for other things like being kind begin to shrink. And then as the shrink, fatigue builds up, decision-making challenges intensify. So under stress, we tend to default to efficiency and not tenderness. With efficiency, it's a bit like a default setting. You're just doing what you know is right to do, rather than being careful.
You kind of become just, shall we say professional or
Yes.
or how? Yeah.
Because what you've done then is that you have remember we talked about words and the way words are spoken. You've gone what's the word to use? You've downgraded your communication from words spoken properly to just the words. And of course, when that happens, then it becomes what we've been talking about. So kindness requires quite a bit of emotional bandwidth. And when you are busy, as we've discussed, it then reduces that bandwidth. So we could ask ourselves a few questions like, do we become more transactional under pressure?
That's the word I was looking for, not professional, transactional. Yes. Transactional. Yeah.
Do we become transactional under pressure? Do we prioritize productivity over tone?
I think this is where we come back to that practice before the pressure comes. So if we've created the scenario of pressure, or because we're having conversations like this, we then rehearse it. It's more like, it's something like making a declaration. The more we declare that, I'm patient, I'm kind, then the brain already is saturated with those attributes, and our default response would not be unkindness, regardless of the situation. So the more we tell our brain that this is how we respond at any given time, we're kind, we're patient, we're not rude, we're not boastful. You tell your brain, and you know what, your body responds to the frequency of your voice. So the more that you speak it, that your ears hear it, the more that the fiber of your, especially your brain, I think in neurology they call it, you're creating neural pathways. So the more you do that, the more your brain is wired to respond with kindness rather than to be transactional. Just do the necessary and move on. No mollycoddling anybody. But then practicing it before the pressure comes.
That reminds me, as you're talking there, reminds me of my flying instructor. And how before you go in for flying lessons, you would have gone through the lesson of the day, and you believe you understand it. You believe you know what you're going to do. And he said one thing. He says, before you come, you've got to practice it in your mind over and over and over and over and over again. So you're there in your room. I mean, when we're in school, we stayed in the accommodation there. And it says, you've got to fly this aircraft round in your bedroom. All those exercises, you pretend like you're in the aircraft. And I thought, yeah, but if I've gone through and I know what to do, so what's the issue then? Why do I need to practice? He said one thing. He says, because when you get into the aircraft and you start the engine, your brain flies out of the aircraft.
It's like people who go for quiz shows.
Yes. He says your brain flies out, looks at you and starts laughing. He's forgotten. But when you don't have to think about it, in other words, you don't need your literally, I mean, you don't need your brain to think about it. Then even if your brain does fly out, you still be able to do the right thing
because
to do.
it has become second
It
nature.
has become second nature. And you just talked about a quiz. We watched a quiz program tonight, and it's just a quick. So the guy was going through a part of the quiz show where he had to. There was time pressure, so he had to, but he didn't do well at all.
Everything just flew out.
Everything just flew out. He knew the answers, but he just couldn't respond because he was under that pressure. So that part of his brain that had all the answers just wasn't activated. But then when they went on to the next part of the quiz show, where time wasn't really much of a pressure, he did so well. So it's the same thing here. You know, the more pressure we feel, the less time we have, the more we go back to default setting and the less kindness that we're having out. So it's good, as we've said already, to practice these things. You know, if we do get into an argument, how would I handle it? If this happens, what would I do? I mean, that's not living a life of fear. It's just living a life of being prepared for certain things if they do happen.
So another question to consider is, do we assume that our spouse knows we care, so we stop expressing it?
That happens a lot. That happens a lot because guess what? You tend to live life in your own mind. And the fact that, again, what we've just been talking about, the fact that you've gone over it, you know, over this particular situation over and over and over again, and you become very familiar with it, you just have that feeling that everyone's familiar with it.
You know, that happens to me when I get text messages. I read the text message, I respond in my mind, but I never typed it. And then maybe a couple of days afterwards, I'm realizing I didn't actually type that response that I gave in my head. And I'm like, oh my goodness, they would think that I'm so disrespectful that I got the message and couldn't be bothered to respond. But I had already responded in my mind. I just never got around to typing. So
that's something we've really got to be careful about, to realize that we live in our own minds, as it were. But not like someone said once, I can't remember where I heard this, but you know, if you've had a dream and then you wake up, now no one else was with you in that dream. So you can't expect everyone in the real world to respond to what experience you had in the dream, because it was your dream, it was your life. So as we come to the close of today's conversation, we want to leave you with something lighter, not as heavy as what we'll be talking about. You know, first is that marriage isn't meant to be a place where love is tested constantly. You know, it's meant to be a place where love is formed, where it's cultivated.
I like that.
It's not, you know, it's not put under stress all the time. It's good to test, but not to test to death.
We are talking about all of this now. That is not meant to put pressure on your marriage. It's just meant for you to become more intentional. More intentional about preparing and coaching yourselves. Coaching yourself as to how to respond to each other. And when you focus, like we had suggested, when you focus on, okay, this season, maybe in the spring, because new life and everything is coming, so we're thinking patience, you know. So if you decide that March, where we've just turned into March now, and so starting from this month, we want to just cultivate that virtue of patience towards each other. So this is not like you're not meant to carry this as a heavy burden, but you are meant to carry it as embracing this grace that's already been made available to us in Christ Jesus.
So secondly, we also want to remember that we're image bearers of a God who is love, you know, and every moment we live in our life takes on a new meaning. It takes on a new what's the word? A new expression of love. And remember that tone matters, presence matters, and mercy matters. The tone, the way you speak, the fact that you're there listening, you're there present in the conversations or in your spouse's life, your family's life as well. And then you always want to have mercy. Love doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. Actually, the quieter love is, the more effective it is. It just needs to be lived patiently, lived kindly, lived faithfully, over and over and over, throughout the life of your marriage.
The marriage experience ordained by you alone.
Did you know 1 in 5 people are still waiting for the Bible in their own language? And for millions living in poverty, to buy a Bible is an impossible task. For less than 33 pence a day, you can launch your global mission right where you are and change that. How? By becoming a Share the Bible partner with the Scottish Bible Society. Your generosity will give 2 Bibles every month to people who can't afford one. Visit scottishbiblesociety.org to learn more.
The marriage experience ordained by you alone.
Okay, so it's that time again for our weekly Bible quiz.
Yes. We're loving this partnership with the Scottish Bible Society, and we're coming gradually to the end of it.
Wow. So here's how it works. For those who may not know how it works, it's just one simple Bible question.
So what it is that you send your answer by text or by email for a chance to win Love, Death, and Resurrection, courtesy of the Scottish Bible Society.
So if you're ready for today's question, here it is. Who prophesied that a virgin would conceive and give birth to a son called Emmanuel? Again, who prophesied that a virgin would conceive and give birth to a son called Emmanuel?
So to enter, text your answer to 07305 070411. 07305 070411, or email info@heartsonglife.co.uk.
Remember the standard text rate supply, and don't forget to get the bill payer's permission if it's not your phone.
We're wishing you all the very best.
And that's where we'll leave you today.
Thanks for spending part of your day with us or part of your evening with us. Keep choosing love. Keep taking the next step.
Keep talking, keep praying, keep showing love, keep watching your tone, keep inviting God into the center of it all.
And you've been listening to Marriage Experience on Heart Song Live Radio, Scotland's first Christian station on DAB Digital.
We're here live on Mondays with a replay on Wednesdays if you've missed us.
And if it's Monday night where you are, don't move. Arise with Eloha is coming up at 11 p.m. Eloha, by the way, is the founder of Heart Song Live.
She's a really lovely lady. She's a really wonderful lady. She's doing a lot of work. And then on Wednesdays, we also bring What's on Your Plate with Annette. It's a great lifestyle show celebrating everyday heroes in our communities.
And if Heart Song Life blesses you, please consider supporting the station at heartsonglife.co.uk/donate.
Also, you may email us at mexperience@lidiosantos.com, mexperience without the E, LYDIOSANTOS.com. You can also find us at our YouTube channel, and handle is at Marriage Experience, again without the E.
That's
and
experience without the
Experience
E.
without the E, yes. And you could download the HSL app or the Heart Song Live app for easy access to up-to-date information about the program.
So that's today's Marriage Experience. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Meanwhile, stay encouraged and remember, God is already there. We wish you a wonderful and blessed week.
Join Ayakule and Bosade again next week on the Marriage Experience program as they bring God's truth to help you build your marriage God's way. Till then, remember, marriage is God's idea.